we will declare that the meeting minutes are approved. We have I'm going to pass it back over to Marco for our introduction and COVID remarks. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Trudy. Again, good evening and welcome to the Park and Recreation Commission's June 20th all virtual meeting. My name is Marco Rivero, the staff liaison to the PRC. I would like to remind our attendees that the PRC meeting will be recorded, and that's beginning now. We ask that commissioners, presenters, and attendees please mute your microphones and turn off your video feeds if you are not speaking. For those attending via telephone, you can mute and unmute your microphones by dialing *6. The top toolbar contains a raise your hand function in case a commission member or presenter has a question during the meeting. Commissioners and presenters may share their screens using the share content box that's above. The chat box will also be checked routinely, mainly to address any logistical questions or issues during the meeting. And actually, since tonight we will be having a voting item, we will be tracking votes either on the chat or as part of a raise your hand function. So we'll be doing it that way. As way of information, we'll be holding a public comment period at the beginning of the meeting. Each public commenter will have up to 3 minutes for public comment, and I will signal to the speaker once time is up. I believe we have Dr. Byrne on the line for the ARVA site plan. So what we'll do, Dr. Byrne, is we will have you provide public comment at the beginning of that item, and then we'll move forward with presentation from the development team. Thank you very much, and I'll turn it over to Shruti.
All right, thank you. And so are there any public commenters besides Dr. Byrne today?
Not that have been signed up. I'm not sure if there are any on the line. I don't hear any.
Bernie, is that okay with you? I'd love to have your item come right before the presentation. That way it's fresh on all of our minds, which is just going to be the second conversation that we have today.
That's fine. I'll just wait till then.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Okay, then we're going to push it to our first presentation for today. Max is going to be talking to us about the discussion on the naming of Highview Park. So pass over to Max. We're going to vote on this item today, guys, and subsequently write a letter on it. So yes, thank you, Max.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Are you all able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Gonna go through the process. All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Max Ewert. I'm an associate planner with the Department of Parks and Recreation, and I'm here today to discuss a proposal to rename the baseball field at Highview Park to Alfred Foreman Senior Field. On the screen now is the field at Highview Park, named or framed by North Dinwiddie Street to the west and North Cameron Street to the east. As a recap of the county naming policy, the county naming policy requires that county facilities, including parks, and in this case, a facility in a park, should generally be named according to the geographical, historical, or ecological relationship with the site. The commission will seek comment from the JLRB and RNAC, which has already been done, and the appropriate neighborhood civic association. The applicant, the Halls Hill Highview Park Historic Preservation Coalition, has reached out to the Highview Park Civic Association, and they have written a letter of support, which has been submitted to the county board already. The proposed facility name is to honor Alfred Foreman Sr., a native Arlingtonian who lived in the Highview Park neighborhood and whose family continues to live there. Alfred Foreman Sr. worked as a DPR employee for over 25 years, primarily working at the Langston Brown Community Center, and was deeply involved in the athletics program at the nearby facility. Additionally, the Preservation Coalition are working with historic preservation staff to apply for a grant to have a marker erected in his honor. In the image on the right of the screen, the proposed banner with the field name is outlined in red, and the location for the marker would be outlined as in the location outlined in orangish yellowish. We've already identified that this would not require any additional maintenance budget from PNR staff, so it would be a fairly straightforward installation after the reception of the grant is confirmed. As far as the milestones for this park, we have already come to the Park and Recreation Commission back in April. And since then, we've gone to the Arlington Neighborhood Advisory Commission, where they voiced their support for the project. However, they did not meet quorum and therefore did not have a formal vote. And then at the Historic Affairs and Landmark Review Board meeting, they voted unanimously to support the recommendation. And now we are back here at the Park and Recreation Commission for the final recommendation by the PRC, vote for the proposed baseball field name. After this, we'll be attending the July County Board meeting for the official approval. And if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Sorry, my mouse has a latency. Okay, great. Thank you, Max. So to everyone, we're going to be voting on this item now. And so basically the roundup here is that we got signaling recommendations from our coordinating commissions that they support the changing of the park to Alfred Foreman Senior Field. We've heard about this before. Just to kick it off, like I think that this makes sense. It is some precedence in naming the field this, which I think is interesting and cool. But yes, I wanted to pass. I know when we originally talked about this, there were some questions, but any questions before we go into voting on the proposed name change? Go ahead, Cole.
I just had a quick question about the monument. I didn't know. I mean, it looked like it was in key foul ground territory, and I was just wondering about a safety concern for its location, or is it a flat plaque?
The exact design hasn't been determined yet.
Okay.
Okay. But it would be adjacent to the storage behind the field, so it would be out of the way and not be encumber any kind of like.
Yeah. No, I have no issue with the naming. I was just curious about that feature.
Yeah, and we're going to be coordinating with our PNR staff to make sure it's located in the ideal space.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Okay, not hearing any other questions and seeing that all of our commissioners are joining us by phone and potentially video. If you could please raise, I'm going to make a motion, and if you could please raise your hand either digitally or physically on camera, or if you're only by phone, you can also say it out.
So Shruti, we need to, so you just made a motion to approve it. We need a second, and then we can start with the voting.
All right. Okay. So then motion to vote on the renaming of Highview Park by Baseball Diamond. Can I please get a second to that?
I second.
Amazing.
Sarah.
Thank you.
Sarah,
and
thank
so
you.
All those in favor of the name change, please raise your hand.
So I've got 7 raised hands. I see Alex has his hand raised virtually. So that's 8. Are we missing one person?
Yes, I believe Dean. Dean, if you want to unmute yourself too, that's fine too. Oh, there we go. Dean raised his hand. All right, now I'm going to ask you all to lower your hands. But we have no opposed, right? That's all of us.
Are there any opposed? Just trying to see if there's any hands that are. See, Dean's hand is up, but I think that's just a holdover, and Shruti, your hand's up, but I think that's a holdover as well.
Letting me not raise.
So I think it is unanimous.
Yes, we're good. Okay, sounds good. Thank you, guys. I will be writing a letter on this item since it'll be a quick one. And so we'll talk about that at the end of the meeting. But thank you very much, Max, for bringing this to us. And thank you to commissioners for voting on this item.
Thank you all so much. Have a good evening.
Thank you. All right, we're going to swiftly move to our second plan. And I know that the presenters are on the phone with us. So thank you for being here as well. We're going to hear about the ARVA site plan. Adam has been our rep for this project, so if he's able to join us, I will be asking him to write the letter for this project. So yes, let's go ahead and get started. Who do we have on the line for the ARVA site plan?
Matt Roberts with Hirschler, as well as a few other folks. Wasn't sure if you all were going to handle public comment first. I thought
Yes.
I heard that earlier.
Oh my God, I forgot. Thank you very much, Matt.
Looking forward to speaking to you when you guys are ready.
Thank you very much. All right, so yes, let's go ahead and do that. So Dr. Burton, you can go ahead and turn on your camera and microphone, and I will pass it to you, Marco.
Actually, it might be better if I talk after this presentation, because that way you'll hear that first.
If it's okay, Bernie, we want to actually have you go first. That way we can go straight into the commissioner conversation. So yeah, if you could go, that would be great. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Byrne.
Yes, this is about the ARVA site plan. The northeast corner of this site will contain a public open space, which is a future park, near the intersection of Pershing Drive and North Wayne Street. However, the landscape sheets in the project's 4.1 submission do not identify the species location of trees, but do not identify any trees, ground covers, or perennials the park may contain. So we don't know what's going to go into this park, and that's important. Most landscape architects don't supply this. It makes a big problem. Some do. The applicant needs to submit landscape sheets to identify these plants. The public will need this information when discussing the landscape plan at the public hearings the Planning Commission and the County Board will hold of this plan. You may also need these if you review the final park plan. The park will feature a large central lawn. This mowed area will not be biophilic and will support few pollinators. Lawns are inconsistent with the County Board's 2016 monarch pledge, which recommends plantings of milkweed and other plants that support pollinators, monarch butterflies, including those. The park perimeter will contain small plant beds, some which will be raised. However, trees will mostly shade these. As a result, these will support few pollinators. The applicant should make the park primarily biophilic and filled mostly with native pollinated plants, rather than with a mowed lawn. This is really important. This is the kind of park that the county board, the county planners often make, and really is not helping the pollinator problem at all. The park should be mostly the applicant should select the parks for the plants for the park, because generally the county's park people do not select common milkweed. Few of the counties do in renovated county parks contain many plants that support pollinators. Most contain mowed lawns, much landscape, and much hardscape, and many plantings of ornamental grasses. None contain common milkweed, which best support monarch populations. It's the only milkweed that really does, and it survives well. Grasses are wind pollinated and feed fewer pollinators into those that insects pollinate. The park and other open spaces on the site, including the tree trenches, the roof, and the landscape architecture, the Arlington Boulevard Bike Trail, and the building, should contain much common milkweed and other native plants that support pollinators. If implemented, the applicant's present plans will not even come close to achieving this. You really need to discuss this, and if you really want to see biophilia, and if you really want to see native butterflies and birds and things like that, this type of plant should not be approved, especially for the parks. And the roof, by the way, doesn't contain a green roof.
Thank you, Dr. Byrne. The time has expired.
Right.
Thank you, Dr. Byrne, for your comments. Much appreciated. All right, and so now I will pass it back yet again to the team on the phone for us.
Well, great. Thank you all very, very much. Ashton, are you able to share your screen with our presentation?
I'm about to give it a try, so it's looking promising.
Well, while we're getting ready, I know we want to be respectful of time, so good evening. I'm Matt Roberts with Hirschler, Here tonight on behalf of the applicant and the team. With me tonight are Ashton Allen of Studios Architecture, Sarah Whitley of Land Design, and Nan Patel with the project ownership. Very excited to be discussing this project with you. This is a long time coming, and so we're very much looking forward to getting this across the finish line. Just to orient everyone to the site, you've probably passed this site many times before. This is the Days Inn site located at the North Pershing Drive and Arlington Boulevard intersection. It's in Lyon Park, immediately adjacent to the Arlington Boulevard Trail, the Washington Lee Apartments on our south, as well as 2201 North Pershing Park Apartments directly across the street from us. Really, we're in what the county has long considered sort of the south side of the gateway into Lyon Park. I'm looking forward to completing that with our application. Next slide, please. So the site today is currently developed with a 128-unit motel under a Days Inn franchise presently, but it was first developed in 1955 and known then as the Arva Motel. It's had various iterations over the years with various franchises, and that's really played into the site history, but really the thing that we know it for and the county knows it for is as the historic Arva Motel. So we're going to look to honor some of that in the redesign of the building. Next slide, please. The site really came to fruition in 2021 with the approval of a special GLUB study that the board approved for the site, really focusing on mixed-use redevelopment of the site that completes that gateway, like I mentioned. Guidance for us about what we wanted to achieve with the site included on-site open space, something that we're going to talk a lot about tonight, but also height and density and how that relates to the adjacent neighborhood and how we create the gateway to the neighborhood through those mechanisms. And then, like I said, also the site history, embracing that on how we integrate it into our overall design. Next slide, please. We're very pleased with the application and how it's turning out, and especially how it tracks the study. What we're presently looking at is a mixed-use redevelopment of the site, residential and retail, 251 apartment units, as well as roughly 3,000 square feet of retail on site, as well as various parks, open space, and connections between the neighborhood and the ultimate trail that we'll talk quite a bit about this evening. Next slide, please. And so in order to achieve what we have set out to do, we're using a number of different mechanisms to get there, primarily through community benefits, and there are quite a few of them. There is going to be on-site affordable dwelling units as part of a GLUB contribution. There will be LEED Gold certification with the site and achieving that with the redevelopment. Off-site protected bike lanes, but importantly for this group, very, very significant open space contributions, which we'll get into. Importantly, we'll be redeveloping what is presently today VDOT right-of-way and pavement along the sort of eastern edge of the site to continue the trail connection south from Arlington Boulevard across North Pershing Drive and really formalize that and make it something beautiful and something that the project can be proud of. The other really significant open space benefit is going to be an on-site park, approximately 10,000 square feet, in fact, a little bit over that, so exceeding the GLUB expectation. And to the comment that was made, really what we're doing as part of our community benefits package is going to be leading a design and build process with the community after approval of this project that's going to ultimately get at what should go in there. The GLUB study looked at that part of the site and really said it should be passive and kind of gave us some general guidelines, but we've to date really just used illustrative drawings in that area because really the community is going to have its input after the site is approved, and that's when we'll really get into the nuts and bolts of what should go in there, both in terms of landscaping, recreational activity, and the like. So it is coming. We've kind of left that open to interpretation for today. But it is our ultimate commitment to design and build that as part of our project. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ashton to walk you through some of the architecture, and then over to Sarah to talk about some of those open space benefits.
Great. Thank you, Matt. I'm Ashton Allen with Studios Architecture, and I'm going to walk you around the architecture of the building quickly and its relationship to the open spaces that Matt was just talking about. This is a view where we're floating above the intersection of Arlington Boulevard and Pershing Drive. Pershing Drive is off here to the right. And you see some of these historic kind of artifacts built into the architecture and carried forward in kind of a mix between mid-century modern, and a contemporary architecture. But really, all of these are serving great as a great backdrop to great public spaces. Over here to the right or the left, you see the public use trail, a new kind of larger open space at the corner, and then over here at the right, this is the retail equivalent space with a lobby at the center. Zooming into the corner, you see the ARVA sign kind of reimagined from what it had originally been, a far cry from the Days Inn sign it is today, but similar shape, as well as some of the historic marking opportunities that we've identified. These are not yet designed at the foreground of the site. Continuing along, this is looking across Pershing Drive. You could see the retail equivalent space down here at the right, the lobby to the left, and then the private vehicular access that's moving through the site, really removing, as it was in that summary, about 5 curb cuts from the site and focusing all the vehicular circulation on one curb cut here at Pershing Drive and another curb cut that we'll show you a little bit at the Mews along Wayne Street. As we go further down Pershing Drive, you can see there's a little key up here in the corner. We're now looking across the yet to be designed park and the public access easement that Matt shared, around 10,000 square feet. The architecture supports around it with the corner of the retail equivalent space and bike parking and units to the back that are all accessed from space that's not a part of that public access easement. Flipping around, we're now hovering above Wayne Street, looking up the Mews, which was something that was articulated in the GLUP study, as was the park itself, as a way for mixed mode transit, slow cars that are only accessing the site, pedestrians and bicycles that not only access or provide all the vehicular access for the site along with the curb cut on Pershing, but also a pedestrian and bicycle and mixed mode access to the trail underneath the building. As you can see, there are also, Dr. Byrne had mentioned, concern about green roofs. There's extensive landscaping that is up on the private amenity deck and up on the roof terraces, but something that's not necessarily subject to the 4.1, so we're not looking to have commentary on that. Another piece that is worth discussion is that there is an area, a private area for pets that is not continuous with the park. It is separated by parks and ways, but it does provide additional relief at that Wayne Street edge, kind of maintaining a certain presence and green landscape opportunity. Flipping around, now we are on the opposite side of Arlington Boulevard, looking back at the property, and you can see the kind of edge of the mixed-use trail, the ARVA sign as it pops up in the distance, and then the fanning architecture that is kind of capturing that geometry coming back. Zooming closer into this trail, you can see the kind of portal as we pass through under the Mews to the back down to Wayne Street, giving a shortcut across the site, but also this improved public use trail and some ideas about the landscape and improvements for what is now essentially a paved access road adjacent to a parking lot, completely transforming that entire frontage into a lush landscaped amenity. And to talk a little bit more about that, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah from Land Design.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sarah Whiteley. I'm with Land Design, the landscape architects on this project. We're going to start by looking a little bit more at the GLUP study that was previously done. And so you'll notice in the northeastern portion of the site, the GLUP study proposes increased activation through circulation pathways, as well as some green spaces at that corner, which improve upon the existing Wainwright portion, connecting the trail up to the corner of the site. Moving west along North Pershing Drive, the GLUP study proposes some pedestrian-oriented sidewalk frontages, which features some improved streetscape elements such as increased canopy, as well as some bike facilities. It also limits the vehicular access that's on this portion of the site, and that is shown at number 4 there. Yep, in the middle. And then on the northwestern portion of the plan, it proposes a large open space consisting of trees, green space, as well as some plaza space in that portion. And then next slide. So this is also from the GLUB study. We're looking northwest in the direction towards Arlington Boulevard at the far end there. And so as you can see, the GLUB has two tree-lined streets, North Pershing and North Wayne Street here, as well as having that park space. It's kind of ill-defined, but we know it's that large portion of the corner there with some plaza space as well. And then next slide. If you can hit the next slide, Ashton. Thank you. And so keeping in mind what Matt had mentioned earlier in the presentation, that this park will be fully designed with the community input further in the process. So those specific elements of the park, will be further ironed out as we get in that process. But as the GLUB study shows, it has that large park portion at this corner of the site. And so what we have initially proposed is something very similar. But the key elements we'd like to discuss are the biophilic elements that we see being incorporated in this park with the community input. And so anyone unfamiliar with the biophilic idea, biophilia is the tendency for humans to interact and be closely associated with nature. And so these are the elements we'd like to see infused in that final design. And so that can be achieved in a number of ways, a few of those being a native plant palette, naturally sourced materials that bring people in contact with the texture and the natural ground plane. It can also be achieved in more subtle ways, such as the design of the park through the forms, the shapes, the vertical pieces that people interact with as they're in the park. And those elements and shapes, they can remind people of natural features such as a honeycomb. And the vertical tree and canopy elements can be more reminiscent of a shady meadow and more natural settings, so that we can infuse that in our urban park here. And so one of the elements that ties all this together is that first bullet point there, the human relationship to nature. So through all these different elements that we have in the park, we really are creating this sensory experience through sight, through smell, sound, with these different planting materials, the textures of the paving, you have this immersive experience that is brought into an urban setting. And then Ashton, next slide, please. And moving back east on the side of the plan along Arlington Boulevard, this is another snip from the GLUB study that really highlights that trail system as having this great double row of trees, planted areas below it with ample vegetation as you experience this trail system and then get further closer to the building. We still have this idea of amenity lush plantings. And then next slide. And so that top right corner is another image of the GLUB study. We're looking at that Arlington Boulevard corner, North Pershing Drive. You can see that double row of trees goes the full way. And then on the left side of the screen, this is the corner of our proposed plan where we have this double row of trees, the full length, green spaces throughout, all the way up to this northern corner here. And so within that corner, we have these different planted areas that will be native planting, from ground covers all the way up to the trees that are shown here. And within that space, there's incorporated seating elements for pedestrians to pause. And there's some bioretention along the building frontage. And so another big component that we're incorporating in this is the micromobility station. And so those are the images that you see on that right side. Those are potential options of how we're enhancing the connectivity of this. And so by having one of these elements or multiple of these elements, we're connecting the surrounding network of mobility to our site and to the other sites. And so it really becomes a trail system, but also a pause point for those who are needing a bike tune-up or, grabbing a bike. And so with that, it fully connects to the other portions of the site while creating some naturalistic elements as well. So it's a little blend of urban environment with a naturalistic planting palette.
Yeah. And with that, I think, the big message here is the, redevelopment of ARVA is the opportunity to transform a really paving focused, almost parking lot development into a nature rich development that has architecture that's providing great housing and great parks for the community. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and look forward to any questions.
Thank you very much to your team for presenting. This has been great. I will kick us off, and please, commissioners, raise your hand. Like I said earlier, I'm going to ask for Adam to draft this letter. He's not on right now, as far as I can tell. So I'm also looking for volunteers on editing as well. So I'll kick it off. Firstly, I want to say I can really imagine this building in its location. I think that's a testament to your designs, and also like our familiarity with this site and just how important it is to get it right because of its really front-facing location in an already existing community that gets a lot of traffic, right? So yes, I really don't have any major criticisms on the park design. I'm really excited about that public-private partnership there. I'm also really excited about your commitment to both finding ways to accommodate the dog population, the dog walker population separately from that outdoor space, as well as I think more holistically thinking about contributing to the streetscape of a kind of neglected area where we know the appeal of living in this neighborhood and specifically in this property is because of its proximity to walkable locations in that corridor that, you know, if you make it feel biophilically safe, then you will go and actually walk it more often. So I really do appreciate that. I want to just mention, to kick us off on criticisms, Dr. Burns' comment, we've seen a lot of success in being able to include rooftops in site plan conversations. And I think it would just be nice for the community to get specifics about what that rooftop contribution in terms of green plantings that are going to even be on the amenity floors potentially may look like. It'll instill some confidence that that same design principles are being carried through to those maybe secondary, tertiary elements. And then back to my main point that we have seen in the recent past that being able to contribute heavily within the rooftop elements really is where we can make some of our gains that otherwise kind of get thrown away. So that's what I have to say just in terms of comments. I'm going to pass it to Colt to start with. Colt, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I've lived in Arlington a long time and familiar with that corner, and this looks like an incredible design for that neighborhood. But keeping in with our parks flavor, is this a privately owned public space or is it a park?
Sure. So it's going to be under a public access easement. And I think the nomenclature really lends itself towards park. It's being analyzed by the county in that view and in that light. So it'll be privately maintained. It'll be our responsibility long term. But we've tried to deal with the design build aspect of it so that it's not just money going to the county to eventually build a park. It'll be done in conjunction or as close in conjunction to designing and building the building. And so those two things can really coexist in that process for the future park can coexist with this.
Thank you. I was just curious about what its status was going to be. When we're looking at that new space and it's 10,000 plus square feet, in Arlington, we're trying to fight for every square foot of green space that we can get. How much of that 10,000 square feet is impermeable surface and how much of it is park space? I mean, from our green space. From looking at it, I mean, it looks more like the parking lot surrounded with a swimming pool in the middle. I mean, if you look at it like that. So, I don't know what the actual ratio is, but it looks a little heavy on the impermeable surface side. But I just thought I'd ask if you had a ratio for that or had some stats on it.
Well, I don't know that we do just yet. I think part of that lends itself to the fact that, the county has strongly encouraged us to give some illustrative design, but really not think deep about those details yet. So that's sort of TBD. One item I will tell you, though, and it's something specific that, we thought long and hard about, was how to utilize that space in relationship to the building and candidly the underground garage.
Yeah.
So one thing that we've designed very specifically is keeping the garage completely out from under that area of the park. And so the garage is entirely contained within the area of the building to the east of where the park's going to be, and that park is basically going to be what I would consider free and clear from the surface to the bottom. So that is going to help establish, plants and trees and all the other things. We were very mindful of that.
Okay. No, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Look forward to seeing more of it.
Good questions, Colt. Thank you. Yeah. All right, Melissa, you're up.
My points have kind of already been made, but I will keep saying them anyway. I really like the design I've seen of this so far. And I want to jump a little bit on what Shruti had said about the rooftop space being utilized. I know we won't have a plant list for a while, those usually come later, but I just was curious if when we would, if they would be matching the ones below, or if there'd be more diversity of the other plants that you're planting in the park nearby. So I was just curious to see if there'd be cohesion between them or be a lot more diversity. That'd be nice to know eventually. I also like the connection to the trail. You had mentioned mobility stations. Is there a capital bike share already near there, or would that be something to be considered?
Yeah, certainly, what we'll ultimately be looking at is some type of fix-it station combined with scooter station, capital bike share, something that's more on-site or immediately adjacent to the site in that VDOT right-of-way. We've talked a lot with VDOT about what can go on there, and they're fairly open to the ideas that we've shown them. I think in terms of questions about green roof plantings and things like that, I would turn that to Ashton or Sarah. I would say, though, there might be an issue of nomenclature where we say green roof as sort of a stormwater connected facility, and really what we can count or not count towards our stormwater calculations as being within, kind of an industry label green roof. But that isn't to say there aren't plantings and other things that you might consider kind of colloquially a green roof. And so that may be one of the distinctions that people are getting caught up in. As Ashton mentioned earlier, there's a lot of plantings. There are things up there. It's just not all of it is connected to a stormwater system, and therefore not called out as industry labeled green roof. So, Sarah or Ashton, I don't know if you want to speak to that briefly.
Sure. I can add on to that. So what Matt said is completely correct. Green roof in our industry typically relates directly to the stormwater system, and so that's not necessarily the nomenclature we use, but there are plants up there. In terms of your first question about the diversity between the levels between rooftop and the site, we tend to do a mixture to have a blend of site plantings. So there is a flavor, there is a cohesion between the site and the different levels. That being said, the rooftop is much sunnier, and so the plants are a little bit more dictated by the sunlight and the microclimate that is created being on a high level rooftop.
Great, thank you.
And on the capital bike share question, there's a capital bike station on the northwest corner of Pershing and Wayne. So it's basically kitty corner from the park already.
Awesome, great, thank you so much.
I see Sarah's hand up.
Sorry, I was on mute. Go for it, Sarah. Oh, now you are on mute, Sarah.
Sorry, I hit the camera button and not the microphone button. I just wanted to say, as far as the park design build being part of the community benefits package, I think this is a really great thing for the community to kind of minimize the construction impacts. I think we're starting to see this in a couple other projects in other parts of the county as well. And I just want to, voice general support for that generally as an idea, and commend you all for taking that on. I did have a question. Since there is a public easement, is this going to be a traditional public park planning process for the design piece, or will that be developer-led?
It'll be developer-led, but ultimately going through a very similar process to you would do if it was DPR-led. So the conditions are going to work that out in terms of the number of meetings, when those things need to start. but the process is going to largely track the DPR process. So our team, or lots of parts of our team, have gone through this before with other projects in the county, like West Roslyn, the Highlands, things such as that. So very familiar with the county's processes, and ultimately looking to integrate a lot of that into what we'll do for this park.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the question, Sarah. Marco, would it be possible for us to also understand, possibly through over email, what staff involvement is going to look like on that project? Just so we can get some flavor if there's been any conversation about that at this stage.
And
Or
actually see,
you guys know too.
yeah, I actually see Walter on the line. I think he may have an answer to that.
Welcome, everybody. Hey, I'm Walter Gonzalez. I'm a planner, Park Development Division. I'm a planner following this project and various other site plans. So for this one, as Matt had mentioned, it's going to be developer-led, but with DPR process, and it'll follow like a similar other park planning process with community meetings, 2 or 3, depending. We're still hashing those out specifically in the site plan condition language, but it'll follow a similar process like that. Whereas we would ask them to develop a concept, present those concepts, get input from the community, refine those concepts, then come up with one final concept to present, go through PRC, and then the commissions, whatever else we have to go through, any other commission we'd have to go through, but it would follow a similar process like that, like we have done before through our park master planning.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah. I mean, you already mentioned it, but I would request that PRC have a seat at that table. I think that we would ask for Adam to be that representative likely. But yeah, okay, that sounds good. We'd love to stay involved in that. So thank you for that clarification. All right, Alex, if you want to go ahead.
Hi, could you all describe what you anticipate having up on the roof right now, since the commission is really interested in that? What sort of infrastructure do you have up there? I noticed a notation for some sort of eco roof when you were flipping through the deck. Could you talk a little bit about all that?
Sarah, I'll kind of mention the 2 spaces in program, but if you want to kind of go into the landscape aspects of it, I think that would be great. So there are 2 primary, I'll call it occupied roof spaces on the project. One is at that, I'll call it the lower leg that stretched out toward Wayne Street. And on there is the pool, as well as certain landscape terrace elements that are connected with a fitness area for the gym itself. And within those, there's kind of pretty intensive landscape creating that environment. Then on the, I'll call it the corner of Pershing and Arlington Boulevard at the high roof, there is a larger overlook at more of a community room. And that, I think, is what is labeled the kind of landscape element again, where this is creating, an environment for residents to gather that's not noisy at the pool. I know that was something that Lion Park is very interested in. So it's a different place that's more of a party room that's kind of away from the neighborhood, and frankly has an incredible view over the monument corridor of Washington, D.C., over Fort Myer. And so those are the kind of 2 program spaces and elegant landscaping to support that. And Sarah, I'll kind of toss it to you to talk a little bit about those landscape pieces.
Sure. Yes, thank you. So the lower roof that has the pool fitness area, this kind of conjunction, there's planting throughout. We kind of have buffer planting between the pool space to have a little bit more of a designation between the fitness area and the indoor-outdoor correlation. And so with that, we have tiered planting between ground covers, ornamental grasses, perennials, shrubs, up to small ornamental trees where it can be supported. And so that defines the space a little bit in that fitness area to pool area. And then moving up to the upper roof, as Ashton said, it's a little bit more of a gathering space, grill, chill kind of space. And so with that, we have planting at the perimeter. We've got different elements in the interior of the space that supports some seating, backed with planting, and again, some smaller ornamental trees where possible. But as I mentioned before, each of these have a different microclimate, and so that's always the highest importance for us, is ensuring that the plants that are specified will actually work and survive and not die out, and can weather the time of being in the high roof under such extreme heat and sometimes rain conditions.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for those answers as well. Anyone else have any final questions on the ARVA project? All right. Well, thank you guys very much. We look forward to continuing to work with you guys and hearing from you on future steps of this project. We will be writing to the board ahead of the meeting on the 15th in approval of the project with our continued requests for a biophilic approach and a naturalistic way of bringing more greenery to our community. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having us, and we're looking forward to your support.
Thank you. All right. And so moving on, thank you guys. We have Ryan Delaney on with us to talk about the Forestry and Natural Resources Plan. As a reminder, this is going to be still worked on throughout the rest of the summer. And Ryan will talk a little bit about timeline, which to me is most important here, as well as some of the major changes. But I think the other big thing is that we want to get our opinions on this draft in quickly so that they can be incorporated as quickly as possible as well, if needed. And so we're thinking about, pushing the bounty a little bit on what we want on this first report. And so Ryan, thank you yet again for being here with us. We all know and love you now, cheerleaders for Ryan. And yeah, think about your questions since we will be writing a letter on this as well. Jill has already started to work on one, and Jill, we'll talk about that in the other business section. So Ryan, to you.
All right, great. Let me pull up the slides and we'll get started. I'll try to condense as much as possible in light of time, so you all have plenty of time for discussion and questions. But yeah, let me know if you all can see those now. They've just popped up for me.
Yes, we can.
Great. Thanks, Marco. All right. So good evening. My name is Ryan Delaney. I'm a planner with DPR, and I'm the project manager for the Forestry and Natural Resources Plan update. Thanks for making room on the busy agenda this evening to hear from us. And as you know, we recently published the latest draft of the plan for public comment and wanted to take this opportunity, as Shruti said, to provide a bit of a reorientation to the project, offer a short summary of public feedback on our last round of engagement and the changes we made in response to that, and an overview of our timeline moving forward. So we just published, sorry, let me back up quickly. As a recap, as you all know, we published the preliminary draft of the FNRP last summer. I spent the last few months analyzing that feedback, incorporating it into the draft, and creating the next iteration of the FNRP. That is the version that we just published on June 1st, and our engagement process is in full swing. We're really excited to hear what folks have to say about the new draft. That puts us in the information gathering and briefings phase, shown on the right side of this graphic, indicated by the orange arrow. And looking forward, we're targeting a request to advertise this fall and ultimately to bring the draft to the board this winter, ideally in December. Before we move on, I want to touch base really briefly on the highlights of our last engagement, since that informed the draft that is out there for review right now. First, to say we had really broad participation across our various mechanisms, ultimately totaling over 4,000 responses across all of our engagement methods, which we were really pleased about. And in terms of what we heard, at a high level, most folks were pleased with the draft. They felt that the actions under each strategic direction as a whole supported the vision that Arlington had articulated for its forests and natural resources, and that the vision in the plan was a good one. That said, this shouldn't be a surprise to any of you all. We received a lot of constructive feedback that fell kind of roughly into the themes shown on this slide, including wanting to see more urgency in tone and content, especially related to climate and some of the action verbs throughout the plan, a desire to see equity become more core to all elements of the plan, for the next round of the draft to include measurable goals, metrics, and implementation recommendations, to see deeper, more creative thinking about land uses and possible incentives, educational efforts, And then we received some feedback around wanting to see a more ambitious goal for tree canopy than just sort of a blanket statement of 40% countywide tree canopy. Moving into the new draft, since our last engagement in response to all of that feedback, we've made a lot of changes to the document across kind of these main 3 areas here. We enhanced the introduction by adding a new executive summary and making edits to reflect the comments on urgency and tone that I just mentioned. We made changes to some of our existing recommendations and introduced new ones in the strategic directions, which I'll go over in a little bit more detail later in the slides. And then lastly, in terms of structure and format, this version of the draft, as you all probably have noticed if you've even looked at the cover page, incorporates maps, graphics, and charts. We have strengthened our action verbs and cross-references throughout the recommendations, expanded the appendices, and most importantly, developed an implementation plan and draft priority actions, which we'll close our discussion with today. So with that, I'd like to move into a really quick refresher on what's in the plan for those of you who haven't had a chance to look at it since last summer. This slide here shows the high-level outline, noting our new executive summary and our implementation plan. And this one highlights our strategic directions. Those are the broad policy areas that create a framework for the plan's guidance. And the structure and general intent of these has not changed since the preliminary draft, but they've all seen several refinements since the last time you've seen them. So now that we're all oriented, I'm going to go through the changes we made in response to our last round of public feedback, chapter by chapter, starting with SD1 conservation. So as I mentioned, we received some comments indicating that our 40% canopy goal was not comprehensive or ambitious enough. And while we disagree on the qualitative side, and our analysis indicates that the limitations on plantable space mean as a high-level goal, 40% is reasonable, we added specificity, calling out local conditions and ecology, historical inequity, and created a closer cross-reference to our tree equity goals, and included a call-out for MWCOG's continued work on regional tree canopy targets as a potential planning input. And then additionally, we included these new action steps 1.1.2 and 1.1.3 here on the slide to further refine that goal. In prior versions of the document, we didn't have a corresponding goal for forest health or ecological function, which is why we've included the native tree canopy recommendation. And we didn't have strong guidance for public sites, the tree canopy targets for public sites and how they could contribute to the overall county tree canopy goal, sort of a leading by example recommendation. 1.2.4 and 1.2.5 were included to add specificity to the commitment that we make throughout SD1 to create more space for trees and natural resources. And lastly, 1.2.6 was added in response to the ongoing conversation with the board and the public about updating the weed ordinance, the Arlington County Code, to facilitate and encourage more native plantings on private property. There's some other smaller changes that we made to SD1, including updates to existing recommendations to seek out even small land opportunities, land acquisition opportunities for natural resources. For example, some of the recent DES micro-reforestation projects would fall into that category. And to pursue bringing forested APS lands into county management or collaborative management for consistent forest management policies across the county. The other new element in SD1 is our guide to biophilic design. This section is really similar to the casual use space guidance in the PSMP. We heard a lot of feedback, particularly from commission members, that guidance on what is and isn't biophilic design would be really helpful for SPRCs, for example, and other project reviews. So we developed this supplement for SD1 where most of our development-related recommendations live. It doesn't really constitute a formal design checklist or manual, but we felt that the FNRP could help better illustrate what the county means by biophilic design by sharing successful projects from private development, school sites, parks, and streetscapes. And it's essentially meant to reinforce the recommendations we have throughout the document, but kind of pull them all into one visually compelling place that makes it an easy reference. Moving to SD2. The major change here was with action step 2.1.1, which was refined and enhanced with preliminary GIS analysis, identifying several neighborhoods that are currently underserved by trees and green infrastructure, and connecting this back a little bit more strongly to the existing conditions description in the introduction to the document. We also explicitly placed this recommendation as a prioritization measure for the overall 40% tree canopy goal and cross-referenced it more heavily with strategic direction 4, directing staff essentially to report out on progress to our tree equity goals. Moving forward, the major update to SD3 is the addition of this recommendation here regarding the use of native plants. As you all probably know, DPR currently follows a native plants preferred policy for public sites. And this recommendation really recommends that the county should move towards a native plant requirement that expands the use and retention of local and regional native plants. And we developed this in close coordination with our colleagues over at CPHD and staff across DPR. And it's accompanied by a new appendix laying out a draft native plant standard. That document includes lists of definitions and requirements, and it's intended to be sort of a kickstart for implementation of this recommendation. We've listed this as a short-term action item in our implementation plan, and it's one of the draft priority actions, so I wanted to highlight it this evening. And then lastly, strategic direction 4, operations, was streamlined a bit, but remains essentially the same as the preliminary draft. The only major change I really wanted to touch on briefly was refocusing action 4.1.4, which previously was a narrow recommendation, essentially directing DPR staff to report out to the county board on the number of trees in the county that we're tracking through the permit process. It's been broadened to incorporate progress reporting on the tree equity goals in SD2 and other metrics that we've described throughout SD4 to be a little bit more comprehensive. And then I mentioned earlier that this iteration of the draft includes our implementation plan. So each recommendation in the plan, that's the 3-digit recommendations, is included in this table in the implementation plan, along with some high-level details about proposed timing, responsible parties, potential partners, planning level cost estimates, and potential funding sources. It'll look familiar to you if you're familiar with the PSNP, because we're essentially using the same format and scales for time frame and cost estimates to kind of keep things consistent. And that leads us into the last portion of new material, the priority actions. This initial selection of 10 priority actions was compiled by our project team and selected to emphasize the major changes that the FNRP recommends in contrast to current practice, to highlight our equity recommendations, elevate actions staff felt will be most impactful, reflect what and really to reflect what we learned about community priorities through our last engagement. In the interest of preserving some of your all's discussion time, I'll spare you, me reading through the list, but want to pause here quickly to give you all a chance to read through the first 5 before I move to the next slide with our final 5. And I can come back to this at any point if needed during the conversation. Okay. And then moving on to our last 5 here. We're particularly interested in folks' feedback on these priority actions as we move through our engagement process. We have a separate section of the engagement form that deals with the implementation matrix that includes, these actions, and really interested particularly in the Commission's feedback on our priority actions as you all review. But please, as you share the plan with your networks and discuss it, feel free to flag these as a point of interest for staff. We'd really like to hear what folks think. And then with that, I'd like to transition to our engagement and next steps before I hand it back to you all. So this time around, we have a 30-day engagement period, which will close on June 30th. It includes an online comment form, which is currently open, an in-person open house, which we hosted last week at Lubber Run, which was essentially to offer a less formal setting to interact with the project team, discuss questions and comments on the draft, I think anecdotally, we had good turnout and great conversation with our attendees, but we haven't yet analyzed all the written comments. So I'm going to hold off on diving into that until we do our engagement recap. But I think it was a really good start to our engagement period. And then additionally, either for folks who couldn't make that event or are more comfortable in a virtual setting, we're going to be hosting 2 virtual office hours, which are essentially drop-in opportunities for folks to engage with the project team or to grill me specifically, I guess. Those are coming up on the 26th and the 28th. The time blocks that will be available are on the project website. And then finally, we'll be visiting all of our commissions like we did last year, including Enerjag, C2E2, and FNRC, as well as you all this evening. And then kind of to wrap things up, as I said, we're in the midst of our engagement on the draft. So our immediate next steps are to keep rolling and making sure that we reach the broadest amount of folks possible. We'll then spend the rest of the summer, as Shruti mentioned, making edits and updating the draft to incorporate the feedback we receive. And as I mentioned at the top of the presentation, we're ultimately aiming to bring this before the board this winter with the sort of intermediate step of a request to advertise this fall. So hopefully I didn't move too fast, but hopefully I clawed back some time for your all's discussion. That brings me to the end of the slides for this evening, and happy to yield it back to you all for discussion, questions, and happy to stay for whatever you need me for. Thanks.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you as always for the overview. So I just want to mention that like the deadline that I'm self-imposing for July 1st is really based on the end of that public engagement period ending. I know E2C2 will be submitting their letter in mid-July, which is totally fine. But I'll leave it for our future discussion at the end of this meeting to get into the specifics. But I think we're ready to be able to do that by the end of the month. So let's still try and aim for that. As you saw, there are a lot of really great positives, improvements made in this draft. I've already had my turn at commenting on it to Ryan directly. And so I'd love to hear if anyone had any questions. We will talk about the main points of our potential letter later in today's call. So these are just questions for Ryan about the newest draft, about next steps, all that jazz. And I see Colt, please go ahead and get us started.
Ryan, thank you very much. I got to attend the event at Lover Run and hang up our sticky notes and had some great conversations with staff and with the people that were there. So I strongly encourage people to use those drop-in hours if they haven't had a chance, if they have got questions. It was a very welcoming experience. And thank you very much for making the changes that we were initially concerned with and have incorporated so much new ideas and thinking. I particularly like the notion of finding little nooks and crannies in Arlington that are rights of way and parts of schools and bits and pieces of smaller properties that we could use to plant native plants that we currently don't. And I know that in many neighborhoods, citizens are saying, boy, I'd sure like to do something with that corner. And now they can. So I think there's a lot of very positive things. I just have a question for me that's just curious. It's like when they were talking about the Dark Skies Initiative, and some of those things were applicable to special exemption projects. And I didn't know what that was. What does that mean? I mean, Dark Skies sounds like a great opportunity for Arlington businesses, public and private, to get involved in, but I didn't know, I didn't understand the special exemption project limitation.
Sure. It's probably more mundane than it sounds. It refers just to site plans and special use permits. So places where in the review of the project, we have a little bit more as the county government authority to either approve or deny or work with our development partners. And that's really in light of the fact that for existing private properties, for example, we have very little sort of regulatory authority to require changes like this. Obviously, that doesn't prevent us from, extolling the virtues of dark sky friendly lighting
Yeah.
and doing education and outreach. But that's more of a targeted recommendation to bring those 5 principles that the International Dark Sky Association sort of puts out there and promulgates as, environmentally responsible lighting, to bring that into the review of those types of special exception projects like site plan reviews, for example.
Is bird-friendly glass part of that same bucket, or is that a building or LEEDs certification? Because it would be nice to have higher threat factors in that bird-friendly glass.
Yeah, it is. Well, it is, and it is part of that bucket, but it's also beyond that bucket. The document specifically calls out county contracts and facilities, for example, but it similar limitations on like existing private properties. So yeah, does that help answer the question?
Well, I mean, it does. I mean, I guess like 4 years ago, state of the art might have been 13 on the threat factor, but now, we could do better than that. But I guess that's another road to. That's not part of this plan. That's some sort of county reg, I guess.
Yeah, and that's you probably find most of the relevant information about that in the green building incentive policy, upon which
upon
which a lot of our recommendations in this section 3.5 of the FNRP are based. It's really like, hey, these are great ideas. Can we expand them to other types of situations in the county beyond, density incentives for specific types of projects? So that's we're tracking with that policy.
And you have the part about mandatory planting native plants in everybody's backyard. Is that
not quite, but I will refer
not quite
you
there yet. Okay, no, thank you.
3.1.6.
Thank you very much for answering the questions. Most appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And thank you for tabling as well at the event, Colt. That was great.
Thank you for representing us. Anyone else on the commission have any questions for Ryan? Okay, hearing none. Thank you so much, Ryan. We will be in touch with you on next steps here.
All right, awesome. Thank you for the time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. All right, next we have a presentation. This is our final formal presentation for the evening. So thank you all for staying up with us, and thank you to Brett for also staying to the end. So Brett is from CPHD, and we'll be talking about the food study, FOOD study, which we will also be writing a letter on. And so this is the one letter I don't already have a named writer for. So looking for some help here. Otherwise, I can always write it too. And so I'm going to pass it over to Brett to go ahead and give us the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all. Good evening. I just want to confirm real quick that you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
All right, great. Thanks, Marco. So again, my name is Brett Wallace. I'm with the Planning Division Urban Design Team, and I'm here this evening to provide an update on the future of outdoor dining, or the food study, one of our more playful acronyms that we have for studies in the county. So just quickly looking at the study schedule, staff launched the study last fall when the county manager removed the emergency order. We kicked off with phase 1, where we were really doing a bunch of information gathering, reviewing the temporary outdoor seating areas, or the TOSAs, looking at our existing policies, looking at other communities, cities across the nation, because we're not the only ones doing this. And then we also had some community engagement online feedback form where we received approximately 2,000 responses, so that was really good. And we hosted a couple of virtual roundtable events in the fall, and this was really just getting a temperature reading from the community on their experience with the temporary outdoor seating areas. And then looking into the winter springtime frame, phase 2, we continue to do some more information gathering. The county board extended the continuity of governance ordinance, or the COGO, in January, so that'll be ending on August the 15th this summer. And then we used the information and the feedback that we received in both phase 1 and 2 to inform a draft framework and recommendations that I'll be sharing with you in a minute. So we're currently in phase 3. We are doing commission review and doing updates to the outdoor cafe guidelines in addition to zoning ordinance text amendments. We just last week, the county board authorized advertisement of the public hearings for the Planning Commission and the county board in July. And again, just noting on the far right, the temporary outdoor seating program will be ending on August the 15th. And so the timing is critical to get these new regulations in place before then. So just a quick overview of the study purpose and the goals. Again, looking at which aspects of the TOSA program could be incorporated into the more permanent outdoor cafe program. We're also looking to inform other changes to current regulations for how we manage outdoor cafes on both public and private property. And we want to create a clear pathway forward for the current TOSA holders looking to transition to the more permanent program. And so early on in the study, staff developed a set of overarching study themes that you see on the bottom of this slide, including looking at restaurants as a public good, understanding that restaurants and outdoor cafes contribute to a vibrant streetscape and street life, restaurant recovery and resiliency, looking at ways we could support businesses to bounce back from any kind of losses that may have occurred over the pandemic. And then looking at outdoor cafes and restaurants as different places and different spaces. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to outdoor cafes, and they really need to work with the existing context. So before I go over the recommendations, I just want to cover existing zoning ordinance regulations and guidance for outdoor cafes. So currently, and also pre-pandemic, outdoor cafes could be approved on private property administratively by the zoning administrator. However, outdoor cafes that are in the public right-of-way or sidewalks or public spaces like the example that you see on the slide here, those would be approved by site plan or use permit approval by the county board. Some other applicable policies and regulations for outdoor cafes include the guidelines, which is an administrative document that was last updated in 2013, the zoning ordinance, the Arlington County retail plan. I'll speak to an action item in the retail plan that is also part of this effort in a minute when it comes to the licensing of outdoor cafes. The master transportation plan, the pedestrian element with regard to clear sidewalks and pedestrian circulation in the public right of way, and then the public spaces master plan with regard to outdoor cafes, but also privately owned public spaces. We also have a number of other statewide codes that are applicable, including the building code, fire prevention code, the Virginia ABC when it comes to the service of alcohol in outdoor cafes, and then guidance for tents and heaters and the encroachment ordinance into the public right of way, which I'll speak about in a minute as well. So just a quick overview for those may be not familiar with the temporary outdoor seating areas or TOSAs. The TOSAs were established in 2020 to help with restaurants during the COVID-19 pandemic. This was at a time when dining inside a restaurant was not allowed, and so outdoor dining was the only option. So staff created a set of flexible design and operational guidelines, and we developed an online submission process. We had an interdepartmental team of staff to review, and all the TOSAs were approved and signed off by the county manager through the continuity of governance ordinance. So currently we have approximately 100 TOSAs that are still in operation today, both on public and private property. And again, those TOSAs will be expiring on August the 15th. So just some images here kind of illustrating some of the outdoor cafes and TOSAs that we have throughout the county. I think some of these examples probably illustrate more clearly, or maybe not so clearly, the pedestrian clear zone and the clear sidewalk width. Some of the examples that you can see is what we call cafe creep, where cafes have expanded to create pinch points, some problems with navigating the sidewalk for persons with disabilities as well. So that's certainly an issue that we're looking to resolve as part of the recommendations. We also have some other examples of TOSAs in private off-street parking spaces, like in the examples on the top of the screen, where restaurants have converted striped parking spaces into outdoor cafe spaces or patios. And then we have some cases, as in Shirlington, that you see on the bottom left, where the TOSAs are taking up the entire sidewalk from the building face to the curb, and the pedestrians, the county installed these wheel stops and bollards to provide a safe place for pedestrians to navigate around the outdoor cafes. So going back to the engagement from phase one, again, what we heard with regard to the TOSAs, primarily, we heard a lot of support for the local businesses, overall, just enjoyment of outdoor dining in general. But we also heard concerns about providing a safe, accessible pedestrian clear path, like that was not shown in some of the previous images. We did hear some support for reduced parking for expanded outdoor dining for those examples that are using off-street parking spaces. But above all, we heard the need to streamline the process, which is what we're currently recommending that you'll see in a moment. Looking at the zoning ordinance amendments that are currently recommended by staff, the zoning ordinance amendments are one of three key elements of the recommended framework. The first is the zoning ordinance, and then the second is the encroachment ordinance, or the outdoor cafe license. This is a new chapter of the county code that's being led by the real estate team, which includes an administrative process for outdoor cafes in the public right-of-way or public spaces, with an application and a fee, which is typically based on the square footage of the outdoor cafe. So the two of these items were subjects of the request to advertise last week. And like I said earlier, the board authorized advertisement. So these two key elements are coming along together to the board and planning commission next month. So just a quick summary of the zoning ordinance amendments. One of the big takeaways is we're looking to recommend permitting outdoor seating in public spaces by administrative review by staff, as opposed to being reviewed by the county board for use permit. Use permits reviewed by the county board typically take on average a minimum of 3 months, and they can cost a minimum of $2,000 or even more. And then there's the public hearing. We found that typically all the outdoor cafes that are on the county board agenda are on the consent agenda. They're all typically approved. So we really feel like this would really streamline the process and reduce time by the applicants and also staff resources to move to an administrative process. We're also looking at the ability for the board to modify the parking requirements for those seats located in private parking spaces, like in some of those examples I shared earlier. And then we have some other amendments to further the study goals and recommendations. And then the third item I mentioned earlier is the outdoor cafe guidelines. This is an administrative document that requires no county board action. This is what I call an all-in-one kind of reference manual that'll include application and permitting process and step-by-step directions for restaurants who want to proceed with the application, including clear guidance for sidewalks, pedestrian safety, ADA, and accessibility, and any reference to any other fire or building codes required. So in terms of our recommendations, this table here summarizes the existing standards and then the proposed that you see in the column on the right that's highlighted. So currently, as I mentioned earlier, for the private property, those outdoor cafes are reviewed administratively by the zoning administrator. We're looking for no changes there. We're currently recommending that those outdoor cafes continue to be reviewed administratively. And like I mentioned on the previous slide, for the public rights of way or the public easements on private property, including privately owned public spaces or POPs, those are currently reviewed by county board use permit, and we're recommending to move those into the administrative review process as well. And then for the third item, the POPs, or the privately owned public spaces, those are currently reviewed by the county board by use permit. And again, we're looking to continue that practice to give us more authority on the review of those spaces that you'll see in a minute. I have a couple of examples. So with regard to the privately owned public spaces, the PSMP adopted in 2019 includes a definition for privately owned public space that's noted here. The POPs are typically dedicated and recorded with a deed of public access easement by site plan condition. Currently, throughout the county, we have approximately 75 POPs that totals up to approximately 800,000 square feet, or roughly 18 acres. We also have design guidelines for POPs that are part of the PSMP as well. Some additional policy guidance from the PSMP with regard to outdoor cafes notes that they may be appropriate in certain contexts, but they should be thought of early in the design process and not an afterthought or retrofitted through a later program. And then encourages the activation of POPs through one-off events rather than permanent outdoor seating. These are just a couple of examples in the county of outdoor cafes that have been approved in POPs by use permit approval by the county board. With regard to the clear sidewalk, the diagrams that you see on the left depict the 6-foot minimum clear sidewalk that's been in place for quite some time. We're currently looking to recommend to bring that forward as part of the new regulations. These diagrams illustrate the proper clear path and a clear path that is typically discouraged with regard to jogs and zigzags on the sidewalk. And these diagrams are from the 2013 design guidelines. And just the images on the right just illustrate when it's applied correctly and when it's not. So just summarizing quickly the proposed zoning amendments to Article 12, which is outdoor cafes. Again, the amendments are reflecting proposed changes to the approval process. I mentioned the private property, the ability for the board to modify the parking requirements on private property by use permit. And then for the public property, mostly sidewalks, there'll be a requirement if adopted in July for those type of outdoor cafes to obtain an outdoor cafe license, which is the new Chapter 70 of the county code. Those cafes will also need to meet the zoning ordinance use standards, the clear sidewalk dimension of 6 feet, unless otherwise approved as part of a site plan condition, if greater distance, the location in front of the restaurant, and then provision to prohibit sound and entertainment when adjacent to residential properties. And then, like I mentioned, for the POPs, those would also need to get a use permit approval by the county board, in addition to getting an outdoor cafe license. And they would also need to meet the zoning ordinance use standards, in addition to other guidelines, as mentioned previously in the PSMP. There are also some other text changes we're recommending to other articles in the zoning ordinance, including some of the use tables for the commercial and industrial districts. These, again, are just editorial changes to reflect the proposed approval process. Article 14, parking, again, more editorial changes to resolve some conflicts with allowing outdoor cafes and off-street parking spaces. Currently, the zoning ordinance only permits the parking of vehicles in parking spaces, and that no other use can be permitted within a parking space. So again, some changes there to that text. And then the requirement for the use permit approval by the county board for those type of cases. And then staff is also recommending a new definition in the zoning ordinance for the POPs, or the public space as privately owned. And again, we're recommending this to distinguish the POPs from other public easement areas such as sidewalks. And again, requiring a use permit for the outdoor cafe, which is the current practice today. So just briefly, I mentioned the county code chapter several times. This was identified in the Arlington Retail Plan in 2015. There was actually an action item in the implementation plan that encourages the administrative license process to use the public right-of-way. This is something that a lot of our neighboring jurisdictions throughout the county and the country do today. So this is being led by the Department of Environmental Services real estate team, and it'll be coming forward to the board next month as well. And so again, this is the licensing for the private use of the public space. There'll be an administrative review process, application, an annual renewal, including an application fee that's typically based on the square footage. And again, this would be in addition to any other requirements for cafes under the zoning ordinance. And again, these recommendations are coming forward with the food study recommendations. So in terms of commission review, we've been busy over the past month meeting with the zoning committee twice, transportation commission, pedestrian advisory. We've met actually a couple times with the Chamber of Commerce, economic development. I mentioned last week the county board authorized advertisement for the zoning ordinance amendments and the encroachment ordinance. And we're with you all this evening, and we'll be going back to Transportation Commission for action later this month before going to the Planning Commission and the county board in July. And so we've been thinking a lot about what's going to happen after the July county board meeting with regard to TOSAs. We're conducting some in-person direct engagement with restaurant owners who currently have TOSAs. We're doing some targeted outreach to different restaurants depending on their situation. Some have site plans, some have use permits, some are on private property. Some people just opened up during the pandemic and currently all they have is a TOSA. So how do we work with them to get the necessary permits for the permanent program? So we're looking that restaurants would be filing applications by August 15th, which is the end of the continuity of governance ordinance. And then we're looking, we've got an interdepartmental staff team that'll be reviewing applications with an estimated time frame of 90 to 120 days after August the 15th, with any decisions made on administrative reviews or use permit applications towards the latter part of the year in the November-December timeframe, which is typically the end of the outdoor dining season. So just including a link to the project website, which includes all the presentations from all the commissions that we presented to, including the staff report and the zoning ordinance text amendment document that was presented to the county board last week. And my contact information is here. If we don't have time to get all the questions or comments in, you can always reach out to me via email. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Brett. Turning my camera on. Great. All right. Well, I was taking notes, and I'm glad that we have that presentation online as well for us to refer to. But I think that, not just because of the regulation ending in August, this is long, long, long overdue, in my opinion, for us to both have guidance on it and to correct some, trials that were made during the pandemic period. I think we've seen a lot of value of this. I think that there's some biophilic elements that we can speak to even here. So yeah, that's my 2 cents. We will be writing a letter on this. So thank you very much for presenting. I see a couple hands up, so I'm going to start calling on names. Please raise your hand if you want to comment on this topic or have any questions for Brett. So yes, Colt, go ahead.
I will yield to Melissa first, so I don't take the trifecta in being first.
Okay,
Right.
okay. Yeah, Melissa, go ahead. Yes.
Got it. Again, long overdue. I really agree with Shruti here. I particularly like the part of using the parking spaces for people instead of cars. Shruti, you'd mentioned the biophilic elements. Is that what you're referring to, like the planters that would be sometimes in these things? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, I'd say there's something we can say here about connecting the streetscapes to maybe plantings or natural elements co-located or nearby that kind of connect that naturalistic element. Yeah. So I was thinking more abstractly, but yes.
Yes, well, if that could be, further included, maybe some, I don't know, further discussion on, what people do with these spaces, if they put tables and chairs, or perhaps things that blocks the street from the road. I forget the name for it, but like those being planters instead of just those concrete slabs would be interesting to discuss. But yeah, overall, really love this, way overdue. And now I will see to Colt.
Thank you. So I was wondering if this is applying to, we're talking about publicly owned private spaces, and you said 18 acres. And is that 18 acres of publicly owned private space everywhere, or only, in Arlington, or was that only with the initiative, the Future for Outdoor Dining had considered? And that's for Brent.
Yeah, I was referring to spaces that are privately owned with a public access easement.
Right.
And yes, currently we have approximately, I think I had 88 of those that were roughly 18 acres when you total the square footage of all of them together.
Yeah.
And those are all throughout the county.
No. So my concern with that is we fight really hard to get whatever green space we can in those publicly owned private spaces. And then and I don't know if this is correct, but it seems like, oh, well, now we're just going to cede back much of that or for dining purposes. So you think about the water park in Crystal City and the kiosks that used to be park space there. And you wonder about losing some of that green space to a dining area that's going to be used in the summer. And then when you walk by it in the winter, there's nothing there except those rails. Anyway, I might be off base on that. Am I I'm not clear on this enough on this concept, but that's my concern.
Understood. Yeah, I think with the case with the water park, I do believe that was private with no public easement, but I think through this redesign, if you will, there will be a public access easement over it now, but I don't think there was previously. But I think, going back to the PSMP, I mean, we want to think about these things early on in the process so that if there is any areas that are where developers want to carve out for outdoor cafes, that those are not part of the dedicated public easement area. And so that's what we like to do. And it looks like Marco may have some additional points to add there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Brett. So I just wanted to clarify. So with the water park, I believe we will be receiving a park easement for that area which previously was not the case, as Brett indicated. However, I believe the area that will be carved out for that park easement will exclude any areas associated with those proposed kiosks within that space. But I can provide the commission an update on that once we receive that final park easement, which I believe will be later on this fall.
I guess I appreciate that. I was just thinking of an off the cuff example, but it seems that particularly in Crystal City, where we negotiate the walkthroughs, and now we've got the green ribbon going through, and now I can see the green ribbon lined with dining spaces as opposed to being green space that we could use and enjoy on a stroll. So maybe I've got the wrong idea here, but it really frightens me to have the publicly owned private spaces being able to encroach on walkways and things, and maybe take away the green space that we negotiated to begin with.
And I think the study should include, what are the known parameters as the touch points here. And so I think, to Colt's point, the criticism isn't so much on the study itself, but as to the regulations that may encompass the study's parameters and safeguards on its side. For example, let's make sure that there is something in mind to protect the green spaces that we've already allotted through other programs.
Thanks. That was my concern, Trudy. Thank you. That was much better said than I said.
I just think that's an element here that I think the study should include what are the boundaries. Basically.
Thanks.
Yeah. Awesome. Anyone else had any other questions on the food study? If not, thank you very much, Brett. We look forward to hearing back from you with the study results, of course, and appreciate, you guys coming to us again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. Guys, we're actually doing pretty great on time as well, and I think that's great. And so we're probably going to end at 9, which is good, or maybe a little bit after. Marco, I'm going to hit it over to you for the staff report. I don't think there's anything in particular, but just want to mention it.
Sure. No specific updates to the staff report that was conveyed to the commission last week. However, I did want to update the commission that we will be meeting in August as part of our scheduled field trip. We have identified the location as being the renovated Alcova Heights Park. Joshua Surik, who is a DPR landscape architect within PDD, our Park Development Division, will be leading that walking tour. We're thinking about starting that walking tour around 6 p.m. We're still finalizing that date, whether it will be August 15th or August 22nd. We'll provide the commission an update on that, hopefully by the July PRC meeting. And we're also potentially inviting NRJAG members to attend this walking tour. So it should be a lot of fun. It's right off of the Columbia Pike Corridor area as well. So if commission members or other folks want to go out for a bite or a drink, that's always an option as well.
I say yes to doing that, first of all, if you guys are down after the August meeting. We, of course, will have our July meeting in person at the government center. But so, yes, we're inviting NRJAG to it. The determination between those two dates, we heard from our last meeting that there wasn't too much differentiation between the two dates. And so Marco is going to be reaching out to Takis's team as well as Jane Rudolph, head of DPR, to see if either of them can join on either of those dates. And then we'll circulate that with NRJAG too. Just think more the merrier, why not? And then a reminder that during the August meeting, we really don't cover very much besides the meeting minutes and the actual event. We can talk about other things if we need to, for example, if a letter comes up or something, but I don't think that we're in that period right now looking at our July meeting. Right. Good.
And typically we would handle all of that business right at the beginning. So, we can certainly do that and then right afterwards move on with the tour.
So yeah, we will get back to you on that if there are any changes. Thank you for those who have submitted commissioner member reports. We're going to spend a little bit of time next meeting talking about some of those. Namely, Melissa, I'd like to get an update on the Bill Thomas Award from staff. And so, yeah, I'm going to skip that for this time being, but and move to other business. But we have a light July meeting, which is in person, and so we can talk about commissioner appointments and reports at that time. Okay, other business. So we have 5 items that have a little bit of a time sensitivity to them, and then we have one that is kind of ongoing, and you'll see we would have one more, but I have omitted it from the list. So let me start with that. Commissioner Harnick, Peter, has decided not to rejoin the commission for another term. And so I'm dropping the Quincy Park letter from this list because I know that's like one of his points that's, kind of harder to get consensus on. I'm just trying to be visible about that. I encouraged Peter. He couldn't join us tonight. He's on vacation with his family, actually. But I encouraged him to write a letter to the commission just saying his goodbye. I've encouraged him to bring his ideas continually to our community. And so just giving you that awareness. We've also already talked about this, that Colt is going to be stepping down in September. We have everyone else who has endings this year has chosen to stay on. But we will be back down to just having 12 commissioners on full time. And so we'll be looking to fill seats. If you have friends or if you know someone who you think would be a good fit, please encourage them to apply. So that's just a ploy for that one. And now I'm going to go in order. So starting with the Highview Park Diamond Field renaming letter, I'm going to take that one on. Can I get volunteers potentially for the editing committee for that one? I'll be sending out an email to everyone with that draft.
Shruti, I'll be happy to help with that.
Thank you, Adam. Anyone else? Adam, you're going to be writing a letter too, so feel free to take yourself off of some of these things if you want. Anyone else would be down for an editing position on that renaming letter? It should be an easy one, basically just saying like, yeah, makes sense.
Shruti, if you need somebody, I can do it. This is Jill.
Oh, I see a couple of new people. I see a couple of people. Dean, I'm going to put you on that one if that's okay. Thank you. I'll send out an email to that committee tomorrow. Okay, next we have the ARVA site plan. Adam, I was kind of thinking that since you're our commissioner representative on this project, it would be great if you would write the letter, but also happy to get other opinions if you would rather not.
No, that makes sense.
Okay, awesome. And would anyone like to be on the ARVA letter? Yeah, Marco, please go ahead.
No, and just wanted to let Adam know that we did receive quite an extensive presentation from the development team earlier on. So once the video is posted, you'll be able to review that content at that time. And I'll also share any PDF presentations to the commission probably within the next day or so.
Okay, great, thanks. Yeah, I hope that I know most of that stuff, but
yeah, I think you do.
Hope there weren't too many surprises, but thank you for reminding me.
Yeah, no, and I think it's a lot of praise mostly, and then pushing for more transparency on items that we're not getting as part of the 4.1 site plan. But you know, yes. Would anyone like to be on the editing committee? I will be on this editing committee for ARVA.
I can help. This is Sarah.
Sarah, thank you. Okay, that's minimum, but would anyone else like to join on that one? We've got two more.
Come on, it'll be fun. It'll be lots of fun.
Yep.
Okay, Alex, thank you. Oh, and Nelson, great.
Yep.
Thank you, guys. All right, I'll set up a letter, email for that tomorrow as well. All right, the food study. I don't have a letter writer in mind for this. And I think that this is actually also a fairly simple letter. It's really providing praise for the study and maybe mentioning some of the things that were brought up today, like making sure that the known policies are being adhered to and acknowledged as part of the study process, things like that. It should be a fairly straightforward letter. We've got a few other letters, and one that's being written by Jill and one that's likely to be written by Sarah. So can I get someone else to write this letter, the food study letter? Anyone? All right, okay, I will draft this one. Can I get someone to, two people for the editing for this food study one? It should be pretty easy.
I can help edit. It's Melissa.
Melissa, thank you. Anyone else?
I can take this.
I can help. This is Jill.
Okay. Thank you, Jill. All right, two more. Next one is the Bingham Center / Silver Diner site plan, and really the changes that are going on with that. Sarah, you've been the one overseeing this project, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Would you be open to writing the letter for this one? I see this one as having the same July 15th deadline, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. All right. Silver Diner. And I can be I'll be an editor on this one as well. Can I get at least one other person for this one?
I can do that since I was the backup on that one. I'll be happy.
Thank you, Adam. Awesome. Anyone else want to be on the Silver Diner project? Letter? All right. Okay, we've got one more, a big one. This is the FNRP. So Jill will be writing this letter. Thank you very much, Jill, for writing this letter. We've already started an editorial committee, have we? I can't remember, actually.
We have at least Sarah and Colt.
Sarah and Colt, yeah.
Right?
So then I think,
right? Is Sarah on? I asked Sarah about it, but I didn't hear back.
I'm on. I can help with that one.
Okay.
Are you willing to do the part on the legislation?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. So I'm hoping to get a first draft out tomorrow to the editing team, and then hoping we can circulate it to everybody well before the deadline.
Wonderful. So I think I'm good on this one for right now. Let's see where we go. Great. Colt, did you want to?
I was just wondering what the timing is on that. If it doesn't go to the board until
I know.
long time,
So
I just don't know.
Yeah, after talking with Ryan, we think that it's best that it go by June 30th, by the end of the contract period. And that is so that if Ryan's going to be coming out with some summary documents of the public engagement process, it would be great for our comments if they can be echoed by other comments from the community or included in that wrap up. And in order to get him the data on time, we should get it by the end of the public comment period.
Okay.
He's saying he's willing to acknowledge it well into July. He even mentioned August, but let's get it to him as soon as possible to make it easy. I know C2E2 will be sending it a little bit later, so let's get ours earlier. Also, Jill, I just think when you send out that first draft to the editorial committee, Colt, Sarah, myself, and you, CC Phil Klingenhofer, Carolyn.
Okay.
Let's get all of the usual suspects in that so that they have that first draft.
Okay.
And our job, really.
Yeah, and then the topics, I don't know, for whoever else is interested, are very, very much the same as the same ones we've all been talking about. And Colt, you're willing to do the one on biophilia, right? You're going to write that up.
Yeah, and I've got some comments in some other areas, and I'll give you what I got, and people can take it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I mean, you might want to hold the other areas until you see the draft, but it's up to you.
Okay.
But yeah, so it's
some of them are cross-cutting, so it's hard to.
I know. The whole thing is a big morass.
All right, I understand what you want me to do. Got it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, good. So that's good. All right. We talked about potentially writing a pickleball letter, specifically on some ideas going on within the pickleball community. I'd say we table that for right now based on, workload. There's a lot going on right now, and we've just had a pickleball conversation with staff as well. So we'll table that for right now. Thank you, Mark, for your time and thinking about that as well. I think I agree with your analysis. And so that is really where we stand on letter writing. I will be sending out an email to the folks who've signed up for these letters tomorrow morning. So we should be good on that. And all the letters will have a drafting date for those first drafts to be due by, let's say, the 30th of June. And that way we can try and get them edited and out well before the 15th, the board meeting. For FNRP, that's running completely differently. I won't be sending out an email specifically on that. We already have a chain going. We've got a good cadence going there. So look forward to seeing Jill's draft in final form before the 30th of June. All right. Any other topics? We have 8 minutes. All right. If not, I just want to remind everyone we will be in person to meet quorum. Next meeting on July 18th. We will be meeting in the Cherry Conference Room, which is 216, that corner back room. Is that the one that may not be in Cherry?
Actually, there was a scheduling. Actually, no, not for July. Sorry, I think that'll be for September, where we've identified the scheduling conflict. So yes, July we will be meeting in Cherry.
Okay. Wonderful. Okay. All right. Okay, well, thank you all for joining today, and we will see you next month. And thank you all for your participation in these letters coming up this month. I know it's a lot, but summer is when we do these things. So thank you all.
Thanks, Trudy.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Good night.